Hello everyone and welcome back. If you are one of the 900 new subscribers that joined us this week, welcome to my channel. I do educational videos on Thursdays and fun videos on Sunday. Today I'm going to be doing a video that I have gotten a lot of requests to do, and that is how to care for geckos and how to house your gecko. So I hope this video helps you. I'm Megan with Happy Tails Pet Care, and I'm a professional pet expert and nutrition consultant. My goal is to educate people about animals and help pet owners provide the best care to their beloved pets. See a pet in my video you like? Let me know, and I will feature that pet in more videos. Crested geckos are pretty easy to find. You can find them at most pet shops, and then you can also find them at reptile expos or look for a breeder online to buy one from. They come in many different morphs and color patterns and all of that, so depending on what type of morph it is, they can be anywhere from about $40 all the way to $600. So it really just depends on what you want to spend and what kind of morph you like. Okay, so crested geckos need to be kept in a cage that is tall instead of long. They like to climb, so you definitely want to get them something that's tall. I personally like Exoterra or Zoomed cages for them. However, some people also like to keep them in Reptibreeze. Reptibreeze cages are fine as long as you can keep the humidity up. For me, a Reptibreeze would just not work. I cannot keep the humidity high enough for where I live, so this cage is a better option for me. A full-grown crested gecko should have a cage that is at least 18 by 24. If you have a baby crested gecko, you may want to think about going with a smaller cage, just because there is an issue that they won't be able to find their food. However, if you do take the gecko out of the cage to feed it and put it in a smaller container where it can easily access its food, then that's not an issue and you can keep it living in whatever size cage you want. But a lot of times people keep their crested gecko babies in a small cage and then move them to a bigger cage once they are full grown. Coconut fiber and moss make excellent substrates for these guys. It helps keep the humidity up. And then you also want a lot of things in the cage for them to climb on and to hide in. Let's take a closer look at my tank. This is a bioactive enclosure. A bioactive enclosure is basically its own little ecosystem. It is self-maintaining, meaning that just like the forest, the terrarium is going to break down waste and return it to the soil. There are tiny organisms living in this terrarium that break down the reptile's poop so that you don't have to clean it up. On my tank, all I have to do is keep the glass clean, but I don't have to clean anything else. I don't have to pick up the reptile's poop. There is soil at the bottom with some coconut fiber and some moss to help with the humidity. The plant is also real and does help with the humidity to keep it high enough for them. The organisms also break down the dried leaves that fall off of the plant. There are a lot of places for the geckos to hide in this terrarium and areas for them to get into that are more humid in case they need some help with shedding. I also have this water bowl in here for them so that they can drink from it and also hide underneath it. And this log here is hollow, so it also offers them a lot of places to hide. Not all geckos will drink from a bowl. Mine will, and that is why I do have a bowl of water in there for them. But you should never assume that your crested geckos are drinking water from a bowl. A bowl of water will evaporate quicker than what they can drink it, so don't assume that they are drinking it if the water is going down. You have to physically see them drinking water in order to know that they will drink water that way. A lot of geckos will only drink water when the cage is misted, and the cage should be misted twice a day. You want to maintain a humidity level of about 50 to 70%, and you should be using a humidity gauge to make sure that you are maintaining that humidity level. If you are having a very hard time keeping the humidity level high enough for your geckos, I suggest covering the top of the tank with plastic. Covering it with plastic will keep the humidity level higher. The next thing is food. Now, I know a lot of people say that you only feed crested geckos crested gecko formula and that you never feed them any insects. And this is completely untrue. I find it really frustrating how common of a misconception that this is. Crested geckos should be fed insects on a regular basis along with their crested gecko formula. I've looked a lot into this. I've talked to a lot of breeders and a lot of people who have kept crested geckos for many years. In the wild, a crested gecko's diet would comprise of nectar, fruit, and insects. Their diet is not only nectar. If the opportunity presented itself, they would consume insects as well. So it is completely unnatural and also unhealthy to keep them only on a crested gecko diet formula. Yes, they can survive on this. They are not going to die if you only feed them the crested gecko formula, but they will not thrive on this, and it's just not a healthy diet to keep them on. When crested geckos are fed only the crested gecko formula, they grow at a very slow rate and they are extremely underweight for their age. But when you add some crickets to that diet, they will grow at a much more natural rate and they will be at a more healthy weight. Overall, they will look healthier and their body won't be as thin. Of course, you cannot only feed them crickets, you also have to add the formula as well. Feeding them just insects is also unhealthy, so it's really important to feed both the insects and the formula. It may not be convenient to have to feed them insects on top of the formula diet, but animals are not what is about convenient. If you have an animal as a pet, you should have that animal because you want to do what's best for it, not what's most convenient. There are a couple of different packaged crested gecko formulas that you can find at the pet store or online. Right now, one of the ones that I am using is the Natural Geographic gels. My geckos seem to really like this one, and when you give it to them, you need a really small bowl and they will eat very little. A lot of times people think that they aren't eating any, but it's just because they eat a very small amount. So you need a very small bowl like this one. This is actually a candle holder that I just liked and decided to use this as my bowl for them. They can have many different types of insects such as crickets, mealworms, waxworms, and dubia roaches. Just make sure that the insects are not too big for your crested gecko. For crickets or roaches, they should be about the size between the gecko's eyes. Crested geckos should be fed about 3 to 4 times a week, and you want to alternate each time between feeding insects and feeding the formula. And you also want to dust your crickets in calcium, but not every single time you feed. I actually only feed crickets once a week because I put as many in there that will last them for the week. Now, this doesn't work if you don't have a bioactive terrarium. And this is because, for example, people who keep their geckos like in a sterile environment, the cricket will actually go and bite the reptile. So you don't want to leave crickets in with your reptiles. In a bioactive cage like this, the crickets are actually able to get away from the reptile and they naturally want to go and hide. So they're not going to be trying to bite your reptile in this type of enclosure. So if you don't have your crested geckos in a big bioactive terrarium like this, if you're keeping them in a sterile environment, you'll want to only put as many crickets as they will eat in 15 minutes. And then remove any leftover crickets so that they don't end up biting your reptile. Crested geckos are nocturnal, so they do not need a UVV light and they do not need a basking spot. I still have lights on my terrarium, but it's so that the plants can grow. They need a heat lamp if your house is cold. During the night, they can have a temperature of about 70 degrees, and during the day, they'll want a temperature of about 78 degrees. But also make sure that they don't get too hot, or that will hurt them as well. Crested geckos are usually pretty easy to handle, but you want to be careful with them because they are very quick and they do jump. Babies are much faster, so if you want a gecko that is easier to handle, you'll probably want to go with an adult. And do remember to be extra gentle when handling your gecko because the tail can fall off and the tail will not grow back. Losing the tail does not actually harm the gecko in any way. They won't be impaired later in life. But I like to see my geckos with tails, so I'm extra careful when handling them. I hope you enjoyed today's video about crested geckos, and if you did, give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for more animal videos. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. See you guys next time.